What's going on? Welcome to the Two-Wheeled Rider YouTube channel. My name is Mario Orsini, and today I'm back with another motorcycle review. Today I have the brand... Who gave me a used bike to review? You guys know I only do new bikes on this channel. Oh well. Anyway, today I have the 2006 Ducati Multistrada 620 Dark Edition. So I'm going to start out this video like I do all my bike review videos. We're going to go over some of the specs on the bike, then I'm going to show you some of the features, then I'm going to take it out for a bit of a road review, and then we'll come back and wrap up with my final thoughts. Let's start out with the engine. This bike is equipped with a 618cc air-cooled, fuel-injected L-twin, much like my sister's Monster 620 that we did a video on not too terribly long ago. I'll link that up here. But there are some big differences between that Monster and her bike when it comes to the powertrain. And the biggest difference is her bike has a dry clutch and a 5-speed transmission. This bike is equipped with a wet clutch and a 6-speed transmission going back to a final chain drive. Moving up to the front of the bike, we have a 43mm upside down front fork. It is not adjustable, but it does provide 5.7 inches of suspension travel. On the back of the bike, we have a Sachs monoshock that is preload and rebound adjustable that provides 4.76 inches of travel. Moving back up to the front, you may notice the absence of a brake caliper and a brake rotor on the right-hand side of the bike. That's because the US spec Dark model only has a single caliper and a single rotor. The regular model of the bike has dual 300mm disc with twin piston calipers, where the Dark model actually has a 320mm disc and a 4-piston caliper up front. Moving back to the back of the bike, same setup on the Dark model or the regular model. It's a 245mm disc with a twin piston caliper. You do have 17-inch wheels front and rear. We have a 120mm tire on the front of this bike. We have a 160mm width tire on the rear of the bike. Just to go over a few more final specs, obviously you have a steel trellis frame, you have a 32.2-inch seat height, you have a 4-gallon fuel tank, and I'll talk a little bit more about the fuel tank here in just a few moments. And it comes in at 403 pounds with the battery and all the fluids minus the gasoline. So we're gonna say it's about 430 pounds totally wet curb weight. So those are some of the major specs on the bike. Now we're gonna move on and I'm gonna show you some of the features. All right, so we're gonna start here on the cockpit of the bike. You obviously have an analog tachometer. It lights up with 620, and a digital speedometer on the bike. You also have this is your regular odometer. So as you can see, this bike has 7,824 miles on it. This is your engine temperature, oil temperature gauge. We've got these different menus here. We have a trip odometer. It only actually has one trip odometer, and we don't really have anything we can toggle here. There is a clock that lights up on here, and you basically use these couple of buttons to set it. Obviously, it's a fairly Spartan display, but everything is pretty easy to read. Moving over here to the left-hand side of the handlebar, pretty basic stuff. You've got your high-low beam. You do have the little passing switch. You've got your turn signals. You have your horn button. Now, some of you are probably wondering what this is. It is a fuel-injected bike, but just think of this as basically a choke. When the engine's cold, you're going to turn it on like you would a choke to help start it up. Once the engine starts to warm up, you can kick it back off. You may also notice we do have a hydraulic clutch, and you may notice we do have some handguards on here. These are not factory. This is something that the owner has bolted onto the bike. Moving over to the right-hand side, again, pretty easy stuff. Your standard kill switch. You do have a hazard light indicator and your starter button. Also, you can tell you have hydraulic brakes. I should have mentioned you do have hydraulic brakes front and rear, as well as stainless steel brake lines. One thing I found interesting about this bike, and it's tough to tell by just looking at it, but that's a plastic fuel tank. Now, my KTM 1290 Super Adventure also has a plastic fuel tank, so it's really nothing to be scared of, and you don't have to worry about them rusting out. But anyway, I just thought that was interesting. Now, while I mentioned the 32.2-inch seat height, you can see how the seat is curved in, so it keeps your legs pretty close together. So even if you are a bit vertically challenged, you shouldn't have any problems getting your feet down on the ground on this. You do have a decent sized passenger seat back here on the rear. Again, this was not from the factory. This is something that has been bolted on afterwards, but we'll see how Kristen likes that when we go test it out. Moving on to the back, same deal. They did have a top case mounted on here. It's off right now, but this bracket has been put on aftermarket as well. You can pop the back seat off. If you look down in here, you do have a cable that runs across here, so you can hook the D-loops on your helmets on and lock those on your bike. You also have a little toolkit here. Let's actually move this back out of the way. We do have a couple of things here in the toolkit. Pull that out. Panel pops out. So the toolkit doesn't have anything major. We just basically have a couple sockets, Allen wrenches, the basic stuff. What I do find interesting, and I can't remember ever seeing this on another bike, most other bikes will have some sort of piece of plastic. Basically, you can't see down through to the rear wheel. But on this bike, I guess because of this under-seat exhaust, you can actually see down to the rear wheel. If you take these two screws out, you can fit your hand or arm right down in there, which is just kind of odd for underneath the passenger seat. You may also notice those are not the factory mirrors. They do have the LED turn signals integrated into them. Obviously, you need some resistors on there because they're flashing a little too fast right now. So just so you know, those are aftermarket. Same deal coming back here to the back of the bike. That is not the factory light setup. It has been replaced with an LED tail light with the integrated turn signal. Now, those of you that have been riding for a while may remember in the early to mid 2000s the whole under-seat exhaust craze. This bike, I don't want to say is a victim of it, but it does have the under-seat exhaust like you saw on some of the Ducati Superbikes. I know Honda and Kawasaki did that for a while, but you don't see this setup very often anymore. One thing I find interesting is if you look at this at first glance, it looks like this is all part of the same thing. But as you can see, when you turn the handlebar, this upper part of the fairing, including the windscreen, all moves separate from the bottom part of the upper fairing. Just something a little different.
All right, so we just went out on the Ducati Multistrada, and deceivingly comfortable from a passenger's perspective. I was actually really surprised on how comfortable the seat was. Also, in the back rows, it really absorbs the bumps, the ruts, the everything we went on, and it was really comfortable. It was a fun bike to ride. A few things I want to point out that might help your passenger in the long run. If you don't want a really good core workout, this might alleviate some of those things. The first thing is the back seat here. It's a little tilted. It's reclined a little too far back for my liking. I would like to see it a little upright and give a little more support to your passenger. The second thing I'd like to point out is I noticed there's no grab rails on the back. It's something I like to have just from a comfort perspective instead of grabbing onto my rider the whole time. And lastly, the foot pegs on the bottom for the back, a little more extension out to the sides would be helpful. I felt like my foot was sliding off just a little bit throughout the ride. But overall, I could take this for a couple 100 miles and totally be fine.
All right, so fortunately before it decided to start raining for 2 straight weeks, you can see the remnants of it there on the road, I did get a chance to ride the bike for a couple of days. Now we've got it back out. We're going to take it easy on this portion of the video because like you saw back there is still running water across many of the roads, and where there's not running water, there's a lot of gravel and dirt and stuff that's washed out. That said, now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Multistrada. So when this bike first came out back in 2004, Multistrada was, Ducati's way of saying, and I think it might even be Italian for multi-purpose. And the idea was you could take this thing to do a little off-roading, it could do some sport touring, you could do some sport bike riding, you could do commuting. It was a multi-purpose bike made to do a little bit of everything. In riding it for a few days, I can see why they'd say that. So let's talk about the power for a minute. It doesn't make a lot. It's an air-cooled 2-valve twin, but the power it does make is very, very usable out on the street. I really haven't found myself needing more horsepower while riding this bike, and part of that might be due to the fact that it's so nimble. If you look at the scales on it, it looks like it's a little heavier than what you might be expecting, but it doesn't feel that way out on the road. It has very neutral handling, very easy turn in, very easy turn out. It's just a really easy bike to ride going around corners, or even if just riding it through town. So yeah, it probably wouldn't hurt to have another 10-15 horsepower, but it's not really necessary. You think the same might be true when it comes to braking. You'd like a little more braking, because on paper you just have a single disc. It can't be that great. And while it's not, super bike level, it's more than adequate. As opposed to the regular model that has twin disc, this one has one larger disc, but it also has one 4-piston caliper as opposed to 2 calipers that are only twin piston. So it actually does a really good job. So I don't really find myself needing more braking. What's on here is fine. And this isn't a big heavy bike. It's not a 1200 or anything. It does a really good job of slowing it down, whether you're going into a corner or you're coming to a complete stop. So one of the differences you guys have seen, my sister has a Monster 620, but the biggest difference between those two bikes, aside from the bodywork and stuff on it,
is the fact that this one has a 6-speed transmission with a wet clutch versus her 5-speed with a dry clutch. This one, while not as easy to pull the clutch in as that Hyper I was out on a few weeks ago, it's much easier than her dry clutch model, and having that 6th gear is nice to have out on the interstate to drop the RPMs down a little bit and make it a little less buzzy feeling at higher speeds. So if you want to do some sport touring on the bike, I'm going to echo what Kristen said. It's deceivingly comfortable. You're not real sure when you first get on it, but the windscreen up here actually does an adequate job of, you know, giving you a nice little hole punched into the wind. You're not leaned over on your wrist. You are leaned slightly forward, but ever so slightly. The seat's pretty comfortable, and unlike the Monster that I test rode a couple of weeks ago, you actually have more leg room, and I don't feel myself getting cramped in my hip flexor area or my knees or anything else. This is pretty much an all-day long riding position, and I don't think you're going to get sore, and I think you're going to enjoy yourself. Alright, so everything I've said so far has been pretty positive about this bike, but there are a couple of negatives. Despite the fact that it's fuel injected, this is one of their more earlier fuel injected models, and it really reminds me of my sister's Monster when it comes to on-off throttle response. It's jerky. There's definitely, you can feel on-off on this thing. It doesn't roll on smoothly like some of the newer models do. One of the other shortcomings on the bike is fit and finish. The newer Ducatis are much, much better than the older ones. And this thing, you know, when it started its production line, it was 14 years ago. You are not going to mistake the fit and finish for Honda quality, so it's just something to be aware of. But keep in mind, it's also a little bit older bike. And finally, the last thing that I don't like about the bike, let's just call it the elephant in the room because I have yet to mention it. This thing has a face only a mother could love. I mean, it's grown on me over the years, but I remember when they debuted this thing, you know, when I was about, what, in my early 20s, and I thought, I like what they're doing, but God, is it ugly. I don't find it near as ugly as I used to, but she's never going to win a beauty contest. So as you guys know, I've ridden quite a few of the newer Multistradas, the Enduro Pro, the 1200 model, and I'll probably be on the 1260 very soon. And those are all great motorcycles. But after riding this bike around for a few days, I get myself wondering, would Ducati ever come out with another smaller displacement Multistrada in a little bit lighter weight package? And then I was wondering, you know, what engine could you throw in it? I think I would lean toward, you know, the 800cc air-cooled that they have in the Scramblers. Or maybe you could put the 821 4-valve per cylinder liquid-cooled out of that Monster and have yourself 110 horsepower in one of these things. You know, the possibility of something like that happening would be pretty cool. I just wonder if there's a market for it, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. So anyway, those are just a couple of random thoughts on the bike. Overall, I'm actually rather impressed by it. I mean, this model here is a 12-year-old motorcycle that still does a very good job. There really aren't any major shortcomings other than, you know, it's ugly. And the fact that on-off throttle isn't as smooth as modern-day machines. But otherwise, you know, this is something I like going out and having fun on as opposed to a bigger, larger bike. It's just kind of fun to go hit up the back roads. You're still comfortable. You want to go to a weekend trip on it? Go do it. You're not going to have any complaints at the end of it. I guarantee you that.
So anyway, those are our thoughts on the 2006 Ducati Multistrada 620. I know it's a little bit different type of video today, doing something on a used bike instead of a new bike. Let me know what you guys thought of it. If you'd like to see more used bike reviews or budget bike reviews or something like that on the channel, let me know in the comment section. It could be something that we could possibly do. And if you're local to me and you have a used bike that you don't mind me taking out and doing a review on, feel free to contact me. My email address is always in the description of each of the videos. You can also find it by visiting twowheeledrider.com. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider hitting that subscribe button, because if you like motorcycles, this is the place to be. If you've got any additional questions about this bike, maybe something I didn't go over or something you'd like some clarification on, let me know in the comment section below. And as always, I'll talk to you again soon.